Hey, what's up, guys? This is Mark Levinsky, CEO of EnterSky LLC, EnterSky Inc., Mark Sky's Entrepreneurial, Susie Dalt Foundation. Today, I'm going to be doing a video on how to raise capital, and I'm going to talk about three major ways. So on my screen here, you see meetups.com or meetup.com. This is one of the things that I do to raise capital. If you're a lot like me, you don't have a very good sphere of influence and you don't have a family that puts a lot of faith in you. So a lot of the capital that I've raised has been from one of three major places. It's been from other investors that have experienced, uh, what real estate does for them, or whatever their business that you're trying to borrow money in has done for them, or they're just willing to take their own risk and lend you their money. Another good way that I have used capital before is borrowing loans or credit cards. Like I've talked about in my story, that's actually how I filed bankruptcy. I under borrowed the necessary funds needed for projects with credit cards and over levered. Basically, what that means is I bought a house I was hoping to keep for 6 months to a year, and I only had enough funds to carry it for about 3 months. So I bought prematurely. Um, I've also used credit cards to flip houses in under 70 days, using 100% of my credit cards. So I flipped a house. One of my first deals was in 71 days. I borrowed almost $56,000, 100% in credit cards, and I used that to make $20,000 in cash, in addition to my original return. So that being said, that's another way you can do it too. And then a third way, which isn't commonly talked about or I think utilized, is actually one of two ways. You can use a whole life insurance policy, and this can be done through like anything with a cash value, an annuity, or even universal health insurance if it's set up correctly. What I mean by this is a lot of people that are very wealthy start moving into what's called an infinity bank, or better known as in the insurance industry, a cash value dividend paying whole life insurance policy. What this basically is an annuity either paid out quarterly or annually out in one lump sum, um, one time, or however many quarters you need to make the minimum amount, and it earns a 5%, usually 3 to 4, whatever fixed rate, and it can even fluctuate depending on how well the market is performing, and it's usually tied to a death benefit. What this does is allow you to draw from the death benefit, but also continue to earn on the annuity that's been paid in full. Once it's been paid in full, then that's when you can start borrowing. There are some stipulations depending on how you set it up. For instance, you may have to pay back the money that you borrow if you overborrow whatever you initially implanted into the annuity fund. Um, Typically, you have to pay the death benefit back on its anniversary date. Like I said, it depends on how you set it up. And there are some other stipulations, but typically people use that for funding deals because it creates what's called a loan wash when you borrow from the death benefit, and then it draws the payment from the annuity. Um, so that's another one. And the last one I'm going to talk about, which is in the same kind of sort of category, is retirement accounts. These are solo 401ks. These are independent IRAs, retirement accounts, HBAs, I think they're called. They're health benefit accounts, I think, or health savings account, HSAs, I think. Typically, these are used for expensive health emergencies. You put this money away into an account, like in a trust account of some kind. It earns a specific dividend. And then in the event of an emergency, your insurance doesn't cover a specific amount. You can use that to pay for the emergency. A lot of people don't know this, but they are actually designed in a way that allow you to use them for real estate purchases. So if you're in your 50s, you're hitting 55, or let's say you're in your 40s and you've contributed to $143,000, and you know by the time you hit 55, you're only going to have maybe $300,000 if you up the ante in your savings, and you're not going to be able to save as much. Well, there is one way that you can actually increase the amount of return you get every single month if you simply just bought real estate. Let's say that you bought a $184,000 fourplex that produces $24,000 a month or $24,000 a year. Well, if you put 50% down, you're going to have a loan payment. Typically, you put 50% down, that's a $75,000 loan that you're still going to have, or a little over 75, maybe $95,000 for a loan is probably what you're going to end up actually receiving. Typically on a $95,000 loan, on a 2.5% interest rate, you're looking at about $750 a month, give or take a couple hundred to $50. And on a fourplex, it's making $2,400 a month. If you buy two of them, well, you've effectively created a $3,000 a month payment that, after expenses on a pity payment or something like that, because you figure you're going to have additional expenses of $250, and then you're going to have other miscellaneous stuff. So that basically means you're going to be making about $1,200 a property. So if you take that in consideration, you can use retirement accounts to purchase those. By no means am I an attorney or a CPA. I'm an Arizona real estate agent. So the advice I give you is not something that you should take and immediately do. It's something that you should speak to your attorney about and determine if this is actually something that's good for you. I personally purchase real estate for my retirement account. I do not buy stocks. I do not believe in the stock market. It is too volatile, in my opinion. In the event of a crash, you lose all of your money. And if you lose all of your money when you're getting ready to retire, like a lot of people did in 2008, well, you're fucked. So I'd rather experience something historically that has never crashed in terms of the rental rates, and has even, in fact, increased in certain areas during a recession and a pandemic. So that's how I like to personally hedge my bets. I do have diversification in terms of the assets that I buy against. There are 11 different real estate sectors to include single family. And that's just how I feel I like to diversify. So that being said, I'm going to kind of get into how you can raise other people's money. So take this with a grain of salt, right? This isn't a foolproof process. This is just a process that I personally like to take. So to raise capital without having to have a syndication or some kind of legal entity for the liability protection to follow the Securities and Exchange Commission's requirement, you typically want to make sure that you have a personal relationship with somebody. So this means that you are borrowing essentially from a friend, because then it becomes unpredatorial. And you basically, what you want to do, your aim here is to basically foster relationships and use your relationships to increase your sphere of influence and raise private capital. I've heard so many bad stories about investors that start out and they start going to people, hey, do you have this amount of money or that amount of money? And then they'll talk specific numbers and they'll do their first deal and their deal goes so bad because they have no experience. They didn't do the proper research. They didn't run their comparables correctly on a real estate flip. They barely broke even, and they ended up not being able to afford their investor the way they had explained to the investor they would, and their investor sue them, and that person face legal fines and their career be over before it even starts. Obviously, you determine your own career level and how and when you want to quit. I've seen tons of people recover from that very easily because they learned from their mistakes and they stepped up their game and did things a lot more effective and efficiently. So don't let one mistake or two mistakes or three mistakes or four mistakes set you back. They're just learning experiences. And if you push through and persevere, I guarantee you, you will be successful. I am a clear indication of what that looks like. So that being said, this is a website that I go to go to conventions and kind of get an idea of what's out there. I typically type in one of two keywords. I'll type in the area that I'm looking or live in or currently visiting. I will type in real estate or business. And the reason I do real estate or business is because real estate is what I invest in, but business is what I do. So what that means is I have created systems or processes very much so like a type of business um, that basically identifies me as an owner, right? So if you have a real estate business that flips houses, well, you have the business operation side, and then you have the actual real estate that you do, right? So that's why I kind of go to both, because you never know when someone selling clothes may want to increase or diversify their business and lend you money. I've seen attorneys lend money. I've seen CPAs lend money. I've seen people that do clothing lend money. I mean, Shark Tank is a great example of what that looks like. Though they literally just invest into new business ideas, and they literally Shark Tank on it. So keep that in mind when you're looking for these conventions. I personally like to look for real estate because it's just where I have the most knowledge, and I always enjoy learning real estate because there's so much to learn, and that you may be in the career for 50 or 60 years or however long, and you're still going to learn something new because every transaction may go through the same process, but it's always, always, always different. So keep that in mind. That's personally why I like it. So what I'll do is I'll type in real estate, I'll type in the area that I'm looking for, and then I'll look for one of the larger ones. This is kind of weaker in terms of people attending because there is COVID-19. That is a thing. So there's not a whole lot of people. Additionally, these are kind of early in the month in terms of when they're going to be. But what I do is I'll look for stuff like this one, AZ Real Estate and Investors Association. What this is it's just an international association of investors that kind of come together every year or monthly or whenever they decide they want to come together, and they'll just have like there's usually an investment lender that shows up here. There's someone that wholesales typically. There's someone that flips houses, someone that specializes in purchasing um, rental properties. I mean, there's tons of real estate diversity here. So I'll typically go to these. So I'll click and I'll register for it. I'm not going to click and register for that one. But typically, what I like to do is I like to find two or three people in a convention or in a meetup like this, and I'll just find something in relation to what they do, right? So if that's personally why I like to go to real estate, because we all do real estate, we all have something in common. That's why we're all there. And so it's easy to have a conversation and ask them, hey, would you maybe like to go to lunch sometime? I'll pay for it. Just want to pick your brain for like 15, 20 minutes. I want to get to know you a little better, find out what your story is, how you got here. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, sure, I'm free this day. And then you go to lunch, you talk to them, kind of get to know them a little better and say, well, what are you doing in real estate right now? Have you ever thought about lending? And then you just kill the conversation there. Typically you talk about, what you're doing, find out, probe about what they've been doing, kind of get a basis for their understanding of lending, see if it's even something they've ever contemplated, find out why, and then change the subject to something else. Just kind of touch on the topic, but don't, make it clear that like, yeah, I want to talk to you about lending. Be a little bit more human about it and kind of get to know them. Because at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning of this video, when you're raising capital from other people, you have to ensure they're your friend, because that's how business works, at least in real estate. And that's how you avoid having to file the Securities and Exchange Commission filings, is fostering relationships with other investors. See, I learned a while ago that there's this great term that's very true in any kind of businesses, any kind of business that you operate. Your network is your net worth. And the way this works, and I feel like a lot of people, kind of get it, but I just want to touch on basically what that means. Your net worth is your net worth. Basically says that if you surround yourself with people that are more intelligent than you, that have a higher net worth than you, then they're going to connect you with people that have a high net worth, that have a higher capacity to function. They're going to help you perform significantly better. And so that's why a lot of people that are dumb should surround themselves with people that are significantly more intelligent than them, and why a lot of new investors surround themselves with mentors, and why mentorship programs actually work. So keep that in mind. I like to go to these things. I always like to learn something new, and I actually aim to get something out of it. Um, and I always try to find 2 to 3 people. I'll try to foster a relationship. First meeting, kind of find out who they are, their story, what they've done, what they're currently doing, the direction in which they want to be, and then I'll set up another one. Hey, I really enjoy talking to you. Maybe we can do golf or play. If you play sports, or like you like golf, you like wall ball, you like racquetball, you like tennis. Like I personally love wall ball and racquetball and tennis. Those are my 3 favorite sports. I'm not a big fan of golf, but I can destroy a wall with a racquetball. So that's just personally something I'll try to do. It gives you a chance to one-on-one with them a little more, and it's active. So I'll do something like that, and then maybe we'll go on a second quote unquote date, and foster an even further relationship. I'll kind of find out, have they ever lended before? That's when I'll kind of specifically talk. Hey, have you ever really lended before? Or really, why haven't you? Or why have you thought about it? Or like kind of really touch on the topic, but not so much to where it's overbearing. And then obviously talk about other things. You don't want to go there saying, okay, yeah, I'm here only to talk about lending because I want to borrow money from you. Just kind of figure out why. And then if they kind of push back, just be like, I was just curious. I've always wanted to get into banking. I'm interested in money in banking. I'm kind of figuring out what your thoughts on it are. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. And even if they don't want to lend to you, I guarantee you they'll vouch for you and set you up with someone who does. And that's what I've learned. I usually talk to them 2 to 3 times, once at the convention, once over breakfast, and then the third time over like a sport, and then like sometimes a fourth time over lunch again, and say, hey, I know we've talked and hung out a couple times. Have you ever thought about, I have this deal. I know you don't know me that well, but I have this deal. I think it's something you'd be interested in. You want to go 50-50 on it? You bring in the funds. I'll do all the work. I've got contractors. Here's his number. You're more than welcome to call him. I've been using him for a while. This is some of my other stuff that I've done if you're interested. And then just leave it at that. But don't start with that, end with that. Or start with it and then see what they say. And then like, okay, cool. And then like throw it to the side, like physically throw it to the side. I was just curious, let's talk about something else. How's your day been? And that's typically what I do. I like to start with it. And the reason I like to start with it is because it kind of gives the meeting a purpose. And then immediately, oh, well, we got business out of the way. Oh, how you doing? Always, I like personally to start with my business because I feel like people hate it when you kind of beat around the bush and then you get to it. And then it kind of makes the entire meeting feel like it was sabotage. So that's just what I do. That's how I raise capital. I raised $150,000 of private capital doing that. So, and that was like 20% of the total funds that I borrowed, that I raised aside from actual lending. So this is a big portion of what I did. A lot of people that start Series 7s and stuff, and debt funds and hedge funds do this. They'll kind of host conventions or have conventions, sales pitching or teaching something that they have to offer and then have people come in. The reason they're able to do that though is because they usually have securities licenses and stuff, where this is more of a relational lending structure. So you're not borrowing a specific amount and you're not aiming to borrow. You're focusing more on the relationship aspect rather than, okay, I'm here to make money. And a lot of times there's something you have to take into consideration too. I've had people tell me, well, Mark, if you're borrowing money from people, you're just as bad as the big, large corporation. But here's the difference between them and me. To them, the people are a paycheck. To me, I'm finding people who are trying to maximize their potential with their capital, right? As Robert Kiyosaki quite often talks about in his books, your money is sitting in a bank account doing nothing, or sitting in a retirement account earning 7% on average if it's in an index, and you're only making 3% because you have somebody else managing your money for you. So after you take all of the returns that you've made and all of the contributions that you've made, you're only earning a 3% on your initial contribution, specifically in retirement accounts, because somebody else is managing it and you have to pay for that. You only get a 7% annualized according to historical trends. And you have index fees and other fees that are hidden and not talked about. So by the time you receive, even though you made 7%, you lose 3 to 4 of it to fucking fees. And so I typically say, yeah, I'll go 50-50 with you if you bring your capital. Okay. Eventually that structure will have to change because I'm going to be doing a lot of these, but I want you to see what I'm capable of. High risk, high reward. And, or I will give you a 20% to 30% return on your investment. That means I will give you, if you invest $60,000 with me, I will give you $60,000 plus 20 to 30% return. So basically I'll give you $12,000 to $15,000 or $12,000 to $18,000 in return, in addition to your $60,000 investment. Where are you going to earn that? And typically I can do that between 3 to 4 months. So if I do that 3 to 4 times a year, well, you just made your money back. So are you going to go with somebody else? Probably not. And typically I only, my personal goal is only to make $20,000 on a flip. Okay. And that's after I've paid my investors. So if my goal is to make $20,000 on every flip, and I know there's like $80,000 worth of equity after flipping a house, after all those sales expenses, I can give somebody else $60,000. That's not that hard to do. The objective for me, at least, is I'm not greedy. I'm an individual person trying to make other people lots of money. That's my objective. I'm trying to make these people that are lending their money to me see that I actually care about how much they receive in return. And so that's how I am different than a corporation. That's how I'm different than these large entities. I don't have an entire staff to pay. I don't have an entire team to oversee. I don't have employees. I don't have these expensive insurance bills. I do have business insurance. I do have a place of business. I do have expenses. But after it's all said and done, it's maybe $2,400 a year. So, and I pay that out of my own pocket because it reduces my income annually. So I don't really care if you pay for it or not. That's not my objective. My objective is to make somebody else money, right? And that's how you should think about that, being an investor. You are here to make other people money, and you're doing them a service. You're not doing them a disservice. So that's just a mindset to have. So that's typically what I like to do. I figure if I can go into a convention, it's a statistic that I've learned about myself. If I can go into a convention filled with at least 80 people and I talk to at least 5 of them, I will walk away with at least 150K, whether it be from one person or 3 people. That is just, for whatever reason, that is a statistic I have found to be accurate because I have done that numerous times. Every convention that I've ever been to with 80 or more people, I have managed to do that. So when I was flipping houses, I had 14 homes. I had all of these other properties that I was doing. I had my three major sources of capital came from other people of 20%. I had, well, it was actually four. I had credit cards that was another 20%. I had construction loans, and then I had hard money loans, and then the rest was mortgages. But I didn't count that for the other for the 14 homes that I was operating. So if you take that in consideration, 50% of my total money borrowed was other people's money and credit cards. And how they borrowed their money was actually how they got their money was one of two ways. They used a home equity line of credit, so they used credit as well, or they had retirement accounts that they had just received paid to them in full because they went from $180,000 to 150 because their stock portfolio took a dump. And so they were moving it into real estate, and they used me. So take that into consideration when you're raising capital. You don't have to you don't have to use your own capital. There are other people with money that need to make money. There are other ways to get capital, and there are definitely ways that are not risky at all. So that's really all I have for today's video. Take what you can out of it, and hope that helps you. Have a good one.